It is great to come to this beautiful part of the world in what is a fantastic concept. New Zealand, as we talked about, is a great sporting nation, but not everybody will get there. And to have your own mini World Cup at the rugby village, and the different cultures, and the different banter, and the different feel, the different stuff that will be going on will be amazing, I can assure you. I want to just finish off because I had a great day, me and Simon, yesterday with the kids. And it was really great to see all different kids of all different ages loving it, enjoying their, which was a real plus for Singapore, can I say. It was a fantastic, well coached by all the coaches in a great, safe environment. Fantastic. So if any of your kids who's not playing rugby, take a chance. It's fantastic. But when we won that Rugby World Cup, and I'm going back to 2003, the Australians were great. I got to be honest. You most probably know it because you travel around. There's a place called The Rocks in Sydney. Very trendy part. I'm trying to paint a picture underneath the bridge, opposite the Opera House. Very trendy, bars, restaurants. And the Australians were fantastic. They basically give everybody extensions to license. They stopped cars going into the Rocks, and they brought out a load of patio sets and outdoor sets. And they called it Little England. And it was the best time you could ever imagine. Anybody with the slightest bit of English or British blood was heading there to have a great time. It was magnificent. The Australians were fantastic. But then it ended. Everybody went home. And of course, the Australians then didn't want to talk rugby. But I was there. I stayed on an extra month for 2 reasons. Seriously. I had an office in Sydney that I had to do a bit of work with. I worked for a company in just off the front there. Whatever, I can't remember the street. Just in the centre there. And also, since I'm involved with the travel business, I do some nice, and Les will know what I'm on about, I like diving. I like taking up some chances. And I want to stay on and do some diving in Fiji. So that was why I stayed on. And everybody'd left after this great celebration where you've drunk yourself sober and went on. And everybody'd left. I'm now in Brisbane meeting some mates from rugby. And I thought, bit of an anticlimax. I'd waited so long as a player, and now as not as a player, a commentator, to see England, my beloved England, win a World Cup, and for Northern Hemisphere. Does it mean anything? Does it matter? My brothers were ringing me up. You should have come home. There was 15,000 people at dawn welcoming the plane back. The local rugby club, we got a big screen, cider and cheese. We're going to relive the day. They reckon there's going to be 500,000 in Trafalgar and on the open air bus ride round London. And I thought, I should have went home. I waited so long. Does it mean anything? Does it matter? I found out a week later on the most unexpected places. And Les, who's a diver, would tell you, I wanted to do a particular dive. It's 3 little islands in Fiji, but not your normal Fiji. It's really outlying. I don't know why they're owned by Fiji. They're so far from Fiji. Beautiful part of the world, where a couple of times a year, some big stuff comes through currents, and you go in one end, come out the other. It's a drift dive, without getting too technical. I wanted to do this drift dive. But to get to this beautiful, isolated part of the world, I had to fly, basically, from Brisbane to Suva, which was, I think, 3.5 hours or whatever it was. Then I got on a boat plane for about 4 or 5 hours, something like that, and then on a boat for about 6 or 7 hours. Beautiful, but isolated, not your touristy part of Fiji. We're on the beach with our kit, waiting for the optimum time to go in. And this is when I found out what it was to win a Rugby World Cup. Beach, white sands, beautiful. You know what I'm talking about. First line of palm trees. Behind the first line of palm trees was a classroom. A classroom like you've never seen before unless you've been to that part of the world, probably most of you have. 4 pillars, open all the way around, corrugated roof, extra palm leaves on top to stop the monsoon rains coming in. There were 6 or 7 little Fijian kids in there. There was a little 6-year-old black Fijian lad. I don't know where he got it from because it came down to his knees. It was once white, but then went that darky, tanny grey colour that only wear can bring. It obviously wasn't his. It had holes round the collar and under the sleeve. He hadn't spelt it right, but on the back he'd written Wilkinson 10. And that's when I knew what it meant to win a Rugby World Cup. Because if it could aspire, this little lad in this most isolated, beautiful part of the world, what must it be doing for kids in England, Bristol, Bath, forget Cardiff. But that's what it could be. Inspiring. Everybody needs their hero. Everybody needs to look up and say, I want to be a Dan Carter. Everybody wants to look up and say, I want to be a Sterling Moore. Everybody wants to, I want to be a Simon Poido. I want to be, maybe not a Gareth Chilcott because I'd be inside. But, you know, but that's what inspiration of kids can do. And yesterday, it brought it all back to me. I wasn't going to tell that story until I remember seeing the kids and the trainers in all the lads running around, diving through the mud. It was brilliant. And that's what rugby can bring, or sport can bring to people. It's kids, it's growing up, it's inspiration. So that was fantastic yesterday. Today is very much about the World Cup. And I think the World Cup should go south. I think the World Cup should go New Zealand way, for various reasons. My head would say New Zealand because it's probably the last time a World Cup's held in New Zealand. They've won the first one. They've got all the tragedy of Christchurch. I think they've learnt from their lessons. I just think that momentum's in their favour. But if they get to a final, I think they'll win it. Even against Australia, who are, I think, second favourites. In the Northern Hemisphere, England, France, Ireland and Wales, and I'm afraid not Scotland, can beat anybody on the one-off. And if that's a semi-final, Australia playing England in a semi-final where their scrum's not doing so well, you know, we'll then find out whether this Australian side is as good as they think. So I think, as an Englishman, I think England will play the type of rugby that will get them somewhere near. We talked about it earlier. Win enough ball, kick well, defend well, frustrate. Not particularly interesting, I agree. And are you a Kiwi, sir? Australia. The essence of winning Rugby World Cup will be the side that plays a mixture of Southern Hemisphere, Northern Hemisphere, and take their chances with less mistakes. Sadly, that's what the New Zealand is. And Australia can play the best rugby for the next year. But if they get a couple of injuries, easily derailed. So this World Cup is in the absolute melting pot. I think it's going to be a fantastic occasion. It's going to be magnificent if you're in Singapore with all the banter and all the discussion. There's not one winner that's going to be definite out there. I think probably in my head New Zealand, but probably there's going to be some huge shocks along the way, ones that you won't even anticipate. Remember Argentina the last time. There's always somebody going on. Fiji nearly beating South Africa. All these things can come into play. Thank you very much for inviting me along. I'd just like to finish off with one thing about Simon, because he did pick on me. No doubt about that. Simon Poido. I'll just leave you with this. Simon Poido's the kind of bloke that if you lent him £10,000 sterling and didn't see him for 2 years, it'd be money well fucking spent. Thank you very much.